In the harsh expanse of the Arizona Territory, 1873, an act of compassion was about to change the course of history. Sarah Mitchell found herself alone at her remote ranch when a wounded Apache boy collapsed at her door. Despite the warnings, despite the fear that gripped every settler's heart, she chose mercy over prejudice. Using her grandmother's healing knowledge and sacred herbs, she worked through 3 desperate nights to save his life. What she didn't know was that his father, a feared Apache scout, had been watching from the shadows. But why did he wait? And what would 50 mounted warriors in full battle regalia mean for the fragile peace of the territory? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah Mitchell had stood at her bedroom window, watching. The last rays of sunset paint the desert in shades of amber and rose. Her fingers traced the smooth wood of her grandmother's medicine box, its familiar scent of sage and sweetgrass filling the air. Thomas had been gone 2 months now, driving cattle to market in Tucson, leaving her alone with the quiet wisdom of the desert and the memories of everything that had brought her here. The box held more than just herbs and tinctures. It contained her grandmother's legacy, passed down through generations of women who understood that healing knew no boundaries. Sarah could still hear her grandmother's voice, soft yet firm, teaching her the ways of both settlers' medicine and the sacred knowledge she'd learned from the native peoples during her own frontier days. "The land speaks to those who listen," her grandmother had said, weathered hands sorting through dried leaves and roots. "And pain, child, pain speaks the same language in every tongue." Sarah had carried those words across the continent, from the gentle hills of Virginia to this harsh, beautiful land. Thomas hadn't understood her need to bring the heavy box, but he'd learned to respect the healing it contained. More than once, her knowledge had saved lives at the ranch: cowhands with fever, a neighbor's child with croup, even Thomas himself. When a rattler caught him unawares, the setting sun cast long shadows across her small herb garden, where she grew both the familiar plants of her childhood and the desert herbs her grandmother had taught her to recognize. Sage, yarrow, and echinacea thrived alongside the traditional medicinals of the Southwest. Each plant had its story, its purpose, its place in the delicate balance between life and death. She thought of Thomas's last letter, speaking of good prices for cattle and hopes of building a bigger ranch house come spring. His dreams were of cattle empires and railway connections, but Sarah's were rooted in the healing arts that had called to her since childhood. She'd found her purpose here, becoming known among the scattered ranches as someone who could help when doctors' visits were impossible and traditional medicine fell short. The box creaked open, revealing neat rows of glass vials, dried bundles of herbs, and small pouches of powdered remedies. Sarah selected a jar of willow bark tincture, preparing her evening dose for the aches that came with desert winters. The ritual brought comfort, connection to a lineage of healers stretching back through time. A distant coyote's call broke the evening silence, followed by the subtle shift of wind that often preceded nightfall. Sarah closed the box carefully, her fingertips lingering on the carved symbols her grandmother had added years ago: protection, wisdom, healing. She'd never learned their true meaning, but they'd become as familiar as her own reflection. The ranch hands had all returned to their quarters for the night, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the gentle sounds of settling livestock. She'd grown accustomed to solitude during Thomas's absences, finding strength in the quiet moments when she could feel closest to her grandmother's teachings. Tomorrow would bring its usual rounds, checking on Mrs. Peterson's infant, gathering fresh herbs before the heat of day, perhaps treating one of the hands for the inevitable scrapes and strains of ranch work. She never imagined that fate was about to test everything her grandmother had taught her, challenging not just her skills as a healer, but her very understanding of where duty and compassion intersected. As darkness settled over the ranch, Sarah lit her lamp and began her evening routine. She didn't know that somewhere in the gathering night, events were already in motion that would forever change her life, test her grandmother's wisdom, and prove that some boundaries were meant to be crossed in the name of healing. The medicine box seemed to whisper from its place by the window, reminding her of her grandmother's final words. Healing isn't just about knowing which herb cures what ailment, it's about having the courage to help when helping isn't easy. Sarah would soon discover just how prophetic those words had been. The boy's fever burned like summer lightning. In the dim lamplight of Sarah's kitchen, his small frame shuddered with each labored breath, the beaded medicine pouch around his neck rising and falling in rhythm. She'd found it while tending to his wounds, an intricately crafted leather bag containing herbs she recognized from her grandmother's teachings, though some were bound in patterns she'd never seen before. "Nahukos, Nahukos," he murmured, his voice carrying the weight of delirium. Sarah dabbed his forehead with a cool cloth, recognizing the Apache word for pine. Even in his fever dreams, the boy was trying to communicate something about medicine. The wound on his leg told a story of its own, a clean slash that spoke of a fall, perhaps from a horse, onto sharp rock. It wasn't the injury of violence, but of accident. This knowledge somehow made her task feel both simpler and more complex. Simpler, because she wasn't treating the aftermath of conflict. More complex, because somewhere, someone must be searching. For this child, through the night, she alternated between Western treatments and the indigenous remedies she'd learned. Yarrow poultice for the wound, willow bark tea for the fever, and a healing song her grandmother had taught her, learned from a Pueblo woman long ago. The words were foreign on her tongue, but she remembered her grandmother saying, "It's not the words that heal, child, it's the intention behind them." As dawn approached, the boy's fever broke. His eyes, when they finally opened clear and aware, held both fear and wonder. "I am running deer," he whispered in careful English, then touched the medicine pouch at his neck. You know the old ways?" Sarah smiled gently, offering him water. "I know some ways. My grandmother taught me. She learned from many peoples." She pointed to his pouch. "Your medicines. They help me understand how to help you." Running Deer's fingers tightened around the pouch. "My father made this. He is Black Wolf, a scout." There was pride in his voice, but also uncertainty, as if revealing this information required great trust. A scout. Sarah's heart quickened. Apache scouts were legendary, skilled warriors who sometimes worked with the army, but whose true loyalties were as complex as the desert itself. She maintained her calm demeanor, knowing the boy needed certainty more than anything else right. Now, throughout the day, as she changed Running Deer's bandages and helped him sip broth, Sarah felt the weight of eyes upon the ranch. Sometimes when she looked out the window, she caught the slight movement of shadows where no shadow should be, the brief flutter of a raven's wing too precise to be natural. The boy noticed her glances. "My father watches," he said simply. "He tests you." "Tests what?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew. "Your heart." Running Deer touched the fresh bandage on his leg. "Many settlers would fear me, turn me away, or worse." His English was remarkably good, suggesting education at one of the missionary schools. "Father must know if you are truly a healer, or if you help me for other reasons." Sarah understood. In these troubled times, even kindness could have hidden motives. She thought carefully before responding. "A healer helps because there is need, nothing more." She brought out her grandmother's medicine box, opening it slowly. "See? These herbs know nothing of borders or feuds. They grow where they will, heal who they must." Running Deer's eyes widened at the sight of the box's contents. With trembling fingers, he pointed to a bundle of dried leaves. "That, we call it mother's heart. Very sacred. We call it yarrow, Sarah said softly. Sacred to us too. She watched as understanding passed between them, a moment of connection transcending the artificial boundaries of their worlds. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the ranch yard, Running Deer's strength began to return. He sat up in bed, accepting small portions of food, and shared stories of his people's healing traditions. Sarah listened intently, recognizing echoes of her grandmother's teachings in his words. A sudden wind rattled the window, carrying with it the cry of a hawk. Running Deer fell silent, listening. Something passed between him and the gathering dusk outside, a message Sarah couldn't decode but could feel in the sharp stillness of the air. Tomorrow, he said finally, others will come. His voice held no fear, only certainty. You should not be afraid. Sarah looked at the medicine box, at the wounded boy, at the deepening night beyond her window. I'm not afraid, she replied, and was surprised to discover she spoke the truth. Whatever tomorrow might bring, she had followed her healer's path. Like the herbs in her garden, she would stand her ground and fulfill her purpose. As she prepared Running Deer's evening medicines, a single eagle feather appeared on her windowsill, placed there without a sound, a message she hoped she understood correctly. The boy smiled when he saw it, a smile that carried the weight of secrets yet to be revealed. Sleep now, Sarah said, tucking the blanket around him. Tomorrow will bring what it brings. She left the eagle feather where it lay, a bridge between two worlds, and began preparing for whatever the dawn might hold. Sarah woke before dawn to find another eagle feather on her doorstep, this one adorned with intricate markings she'd never seen before. The morning air carried the lingering scent of wood smoke, though no fire burned nearby. Signs, she realized, deliberately left for her to read, if only she knew their language. Inside, Running Deer slept peacefully, his fever completely gone. The wound on his leg was healing cleanly, a testament to both her grandmother's teachings and the mysterious medicines in his own pouch. As she checked his bandages, she noticed new items had appeared beside his bed. A small cloth bundle of unfamiliar herbs and a beautifully tanned leather water flask. "My father," Running Deer said simply, watching her examine the gifts. "He approves of your healing ways." The boy's eyes held a wisdom beyond his years, reflecting the complex world he straddled between Apache and settler cultures. Sarah added the new herbs to her morning preparations, recognizing the gesture's significance. "Will you tell me about these?" she asked, handling the plants with reverence. Running Deer nodded, sitting up straighter. "This one," he pointed to a twisted root, "we call Thunder's Strength. It grows only in hidden canyons where the eagles nest." He touched each herb in turn, sharing names and uses passed down through generations of Apache healers. The morning passed in quiet exchange of knowledge, interrupted only by Sarah's routine checks on the ranch. Each time she stepped outside, she felt the watchful presence in the surrounding landscape, not threatening, but evaluating, measuring her every move against some unknown standard. Near midday, the first warning came. Dust on the horizon announced riders approaching, 3 men from the nearest ranch, led by Walt Henderson, a man known more for his prejudices than his wisdom. Sarah quickly helped Running Deer move to a back room, concealing signs of his presence. The boy moved without question or protest, clearly familiar with the need for swift concealment. "Miss Sarah," Henderson's voice boomed from her yard. "Got word of Apache signs in these parts. Smoke signals up in the hills last night." Sarah stepped onto her porch, maintaining a calm she didn't entirely feel. "Good morning, Walt. I haven't seen anything unusual." The eagle feather pressed against her ankle, hidden by her skirt. Henderson's weathered face creased with concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Now, being alone out here, you need to be extra careful. These scouts, they're crafty devils. Play both sides against the middle, they do. Work for the army one day, their own people the next." "I appreciate your concern," Sarah replied evenly, "but I have plenty of work here that needs tending." She gestured to her herb garden, the drying plants hanging from her porch roof. "Them Indian medicines you're always fooling with," Henderson scoffed, but there was an edge to his voice. "Miss Sarah, there's talk about you being too friendly with the local tribes. Healing their people, learning their ways. Some folks don't like it." The threat lay thinly veiled beneath his words. Sarah thought of running deer, of the eagle feather, of her grandmother's teachings about healing transcending boundaries. "The only talk that concerns me, Mr. Henderson, is that of people in need of help. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have medicines to prepare." As the riders departed, their warnings hanging in the dust-filled air, Sarah felt the watching presence grow, closer, more tangible. When she returned inside, Running Deer was already back in his bed, his dark eyes serious. "They will return," he said softly. "With others, it is always the way." Sarah nodded, recovering the eagle feather from its hiding place. "Then we must be ready." She placed it beside his medicine pouch. "Your father, he's not just watching, is he? He's protecting." Running Deer smiled, a flash of boyish pride breaking through his serious demeanor. "My father says sometimes the best protection is to let others think they are the hunters, when really they are the hunted." Throughout the afternoon, Sarah noticed more signs of the hidden watchers, subtle movements in the scrubland, the occasional glint of sunlight on metal, the way the ranch dogs remained calm despite the presence of strangers. Black Wolf was indeed a master of his craft, revealing just enough of his presence to warn away threats while remaining invisible to unfriendly eyes. As evening approached, Sarah found a fresh set of tracks near her herb garden, deliberately left, she realized, in the soft soil. They formed a pattern that Running Deer explained was a message. Allies were gathering. Preparation was needed. "Tomorrow," he said, studying Sarah's face carefully, "you must make a choice. My father's people, they do not offer protection lightly, or to many outside the tribe." Sarah touched the smooth wood of her grandmother's medicine box, remembering old lessons about duty, courage, and the bonds that healing could forge. "I made my choice the moment I found you at my door," she replied. "Everything since has just been following that path where it leads." The night settled around them, full of whispered promises and shifting shadows. Somewhere in the darkness, Apache warriors moved like ghosts through the territory, preparing for what was to come. Sarah added fresh herbs to Running Deer's medicine. Pouch sang the healing songs her grandmother had taught her and waited for dawn to reveal what destiny had in store. Dawn arrived with the sharp report of rifle fire. 3 quick shots from the North Ridge, a settler's signal of urgent news. Sarah had just finished changing Running Deer's bandages when she heard horses approaching at a gallop. Too many horses, moving too fast. "They found signs," Running Deer said quietly, reaching for his medicine pouch. The broken peace pipe was seen. He spoke of the symbolic gesture his father had warned him about, a ritual breaking of the ceremonial pipe by renegade warriors, signaling their rejection of peace talks with the army. Sarah moved swiftly, gathering her most precious medicines into her grandmother's box. "Can you walk?" When the boy nodded, she helped him to the root cellar, where dried herbs hung from the rafters. "Stay quiet. Whatever happens, I know the way of silence," he assured her, disappearing into the shadows just as boots thundered on her porch. This time, Walt Henderson wasn't alone. 6 armed men accompanied him, including Jeremy Hawkins, whose brother had been killed in an Apache raid the previous spring. Their faces were hard, their intentions written in the way they gripped their weapons. "Step aside, Miss Sarah," Henderson commanded. "We found Apache tracks all around your property, fresh ones, and smoke signals all night in the hills." He held up a broken pipe stem decorated with Apache beadwork. "This was found 2 miles north. You know what it means." Sarah stood in her doorway, one hand resting on the doorframe. "I know what you think it means, Walt. I also know that jumping to conclusions is a good way to start trouble where none exists. Trouble's already here, Hawkins spat, pushing forward, and you're harboring it. We've all seen you gathering. They're herbs, learning their devil's medicines, playing both sides just like them scout Indians. The only side I'm on is that of healing, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Something my grandmother taught me, something your own families have benefited from. Or have you forgotten last winter, Jeremy, when your daughter's fever broke using those devil's medicines you speak of? Hawkins flushed, but didn't back down. That was different. These are war times now. That broken pipe means... It means... Someone wants war, Sarah cut in. Doesn't mean we have to give it to them. Henderson stepped closer, his voice dropping. Sarah, be reasonable. We need to search the property, just to be sure. You're Thomas's wife. We owe him that much too. Look after you while he's away. Make sure you haven't been coerced. The implication stung, but Sarah held her ground. The only coercion I see is 6 armed men threatening a lone woman on her own property. She straightened her spine, her grandmother's strength flowing through her. I know you're scared. We all are. But fear makes for poor decisions, Walt. Poor decisions lead to blood, and blood leads to more blood. A sudden movement in the scrubland caught their attention, a flash of color, too deliberate to be natural. One of the men raised his rifle. Hold! Henderson barked, but the tension had already shifted. Everyone had seen it now, the signs of watching eyes of hidden presence. You see, Hawkins snarled, they're out there right now and you're helping them. Sarah felt something change in the air, a stillness that spoke of drawn bowstrings, of weapons ready but not yet revealed. She knew Black Wolf's warriors were out there, knew a single wrong move could ignite a situation already primed for violence. Yes, they're out there, she said calmly. They've been out there for days, and not once have they made a hostile move. Ask yourselves why. Because they're planning something bigger, one of the other men muttered, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Sarah saw her opening. Or because they're watching, learning, just like you are. That broken pipe you found. Did you consider it might be a warning instead of a threat? A sign to both sides that some want war? She took a careful step forward. But some want peace too. Some understand that healing can't happen at the end of a gun. Henderson's face worked through a complex series of emotions. He'd known Sarah. Since she first arrived with Thomas, had seen her work what many called miracles with her medicines. Maybe, he said slowly, maybe we should take this to the army. Let them sort it out. The army, Sarah replied, is 3 days' ride from here. A lot can happen in 3 days. Bad decisions, tragic mistakes, or... She paused meaningfully. We can choose a different path, one that doesn't end in bloodshed. Another movement in the brush, this time a deliberate flash of an eagle feather. Sarah recognized it as the one Black Wolf had left, a signal, she realized, not just of approval but of alliance. Hawkins saw it too, his rifle starting to rise again, but Henderson's hand pushed the barrel down. Enough, the older man said. Miss Sarah's right about one thing. Fear makes for poor decisions. He turned to Sarah, his expression grave. But this isn't over. If we find proof you're working against your own people... My people, Sarah said quietly, are those who choose healing over harm, just like my grandmother taught me, just like your own mothers probably taught you, before fear made you forget. The men withdrew, their postures still stiff with suspicion, but their immediate aggression deflated. As they mounted up, Sarah caught glimpses of shadows moving through the brush, Apache warriors melting away as silently as they had appeared. When the dust of the settlers' departure had settled, running, Deer emerged from the root cellar. You have courage, he said simply. Like the mountain lion, fierce when threatened, but wise enough to know when not to use claws. Sarah sank into her porch chair, the morning's tension finally catching up with her. Your father, he could have attacked. Why didn't he? Running. Deer smiled, touching his medicine pouch. Because you proved yourself a true healer. You fought with words and wisdom, not weapons. This is what he needed to see. As if in confirmation, a new eagle feather appeared on the porch railing, this one decorated with symbols of protection and alliance. The message was clear. Sarah had passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. But as she watched the sun climb higher, Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The broken peace pipe spoke of darker times ahead, of choices yet to be made. She could only hope that when those moments came, she would find the same courage that had carried her through this. Morning's confrontation. Black Wolf sat motionless in the gathering dusk, his warrior's shield resting against a granite boulder beside him. From this hidden vantage point, he could see every approach to the Mitchell ranch, every movement around the homestead where his son now rested. 3 days of watching had taught him much about the white woman healer. She moved like someone who listened to the land, not with the clumsy urgency of most settlers, but with the measured patience of one who understood nature's rhythms. Her herb gathering followed the sun's path. Her water hauling respected the morning coolness. Her medicines drew from both worlds he straddled as a scout. A hawk watches its prey before striking, his father had taught him long ago. But a wise hawk also watches to learn. Black Wolf had learned much indeed. He thought of his son's words, carried to him by night winds through the open window. She sings the old songs, father, not like the missionaries who fear our ways. She understands that medicine is medicine, no matter whose hands hold it. The woman, Sarah, he had heard others call her, had proven herself beyond his expectations. The morning's confrontation had revealed her spirit's true nature. Many would have broken under such pressure, betrayed his son's presence to save themselves. Instead, she had stood like a mountain, unmoved by fear or threats. His fingers traced the intricate patterns on his shield, marks that told the story of his own journey between two worlds. As an army scout, he had learned the ways of the white man's military, their strengths and weaknesses, their strange mix of power and fear. But he had never forgotten the deeper wisdom of his people, the understanding that true strength often lay in knowing when not to fight. A soft owl call signaled the approach of 2 ravens, one of his most trusted warriors. The man materialized from the shadows like a spirit, his movement so fluid it barely disturbed the evening air. The woman tends your son's wounds with new medicines, 2 ravens reported in their native tongue. She has combined our sacred herbs with her own. The boy's strength returns quickly. He hesitated, then added, "She treats him as a mother would." Black Wolf nodded slowly. He had seen this himself. The gentle way she changed bandages, her patient, teaching of her healing arts, the genuine concern in her eyes. And the settlers? They gather at Henderson's ranch. 12 men now. They speak of returning with more numbers. 2 ravens' face showed his contempt. They are like coyotes, brave only in packs. Or perhaps, Black Wolf mused, they are like oats, protecting what they love, even if their fear makes them foolish. He had not survived as a scout by dismissing his enemies as simple beasts. Understanding bred better strategy than contempt. As night deepened, he watched Sarah move through her evening routine. Through the window, he could see running deer sitting up in bed, demonstrating something with his hands, likely explaining the meaning of different medicine symbols. The boy's face was animated, happy despite his injury. She risks much. 2 ravens observed. Her own people turn against her for helping the boy. Perhaps she sees beyond her people and our people, Black Wolf replied. Like the plants she gathers, she seems to understand that healing knows no boundaries. He touched the eagle feather he would soon leave as a message, this one marked with symbols of respect and protection. His decision had been made gradually, shaped by each small observation. Her skill with medicines, her courage against threats, her genuine care for his son. But most importantly, her wisdom in understanding that peace required more courage than war. Running deer's laughter drifted out into the night. a sound Black Wolf had feared he might never hear again when his son had disappeared during the scouting mission. The boy had inherited his mother's gift for healing, showing more interest in medicines than warfare. Black Wolf had struggled with this at first, but now, watching his son share knowledge with this remarkable white healer, he saw strength of a different kind. "Gather the others," he instructed two ravens. "When dawn comes, we will show ourselves. But first," he rose silently, lifting his shield, "I must complete the ritual of acceptance." The shield would be his gift to her, a symbol no settler would fully understand, but one that would mark her as under his protection. Its presence in her home would send a clear message to any Apache who saw it. This woman had earned a place of respect among their people. As he moved through the darkness toward the ranch house, Black Wolf reflected on the strangeness of destiny. He had lost his wife, Running Deer's mother, to fever despite the best efforts of both Apache medicine women and army doctors. Perhaps that shared understanding of loss and healing had helped him recognize something special in Sarah's efforts to bridge the same divisions that had failed his wife. The moon emerged from behind a cloud, illuminating his path. In its light, he could see Sarah through the window, teaching his son how to wrap a healing pouch in the settler way, while clearly honoring the Apache medicines it would contain. Two worlds meeting, neither diminished by the exchange. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The settlers would return, the army would eventually hear of his activities, and the renegade warriors who had broken the peace pipe would continue their push toward war. But tonight, watching his son heal under the care of this brave woman, Black Wolf felt something he had not experienced since his wife's death: hope. The morning mist still clung to the valley when Sarah heard it, a sound like distant thunder, though the sky was clear. Running Deer, already awake and alert, moved to the window with newfound strength. His face bore the traditional markings of his people, carefully applied with paint from his medicine pouch before dawn. "It is time," he said simply, pride evident in his voice. "Father comes with the warrior society." The thunder grew closer, resolving into the rhythmic drumming of hooves against earth. Sarah stepped onto her porch, her grandmother's medicine box held close like a talisman. The sun's first rays were just breaking over the eastern mesas, and in that golden light she witnessed a sight few settlers had ever seen and lived to tell about. They emerged from the morning mist like spirits made flesh. 50 Apache warriors, in full ceremonial dress, their horses' hooves striking the earth in perfect unison. Their faces bore the sacred war paint of protection and alliance, bold stripes of red and white that caught the dawn light like fire. Leading them, astride a magnificent paint horse, rode a warrior whose presence commanded attention without seeking it. Black Wolf. Sarah recognized him instantly, though they had never met. He carried himself with the same quiet dignity she'd seen in Running Deer, but tempered by years of walking between worlds. His shield, the one she'd glimpsed in moonlight, was strapped to his back, its surface decorated with symbols of both protection and healing. The warriors fanned out around her ranch in a precise formation, their movements speaking of long practice and absolute discipline. Not a word was spoken, but the message was clear. This land now stood under their protection. Black Wolf dismounted with fluid grace, his moccasins silent on the packed earth. He wore both Apache garments and elements of army scout clothing, another sign of his dual nature. The paint across his face marked him as both warrior and medicine man, a combination Sarah hadn't known was possible. "My son lives because of you," he said in perfect English, his voice deep and measured. "You faced your own people's anger to protect him. You honored our medicines while sharing your own." He touched the eagle feather in his hair, the mate to the one he'd left on her porch. "Such courage creates bonds that cannot be broken." Sarah inclined her head respectfully. "Your son taught me as much as I taught him. Our people's medicines are stronger together than apart." A ghost of a smile touched Black Wolf's stern features. like the sacred herbs that grow side by side in the canyon bottoms, each with its own strength, each making the other stronger. He gestured to his warriors. We come not for war, but to prevent it. The broken peace pipe speaks of trouble from both sides. Here, at this place of healing, we make our stand for something different. Running Deer appeared in the doorway, standing, straight despite his healing wound. Black Wolf's eyes softened at the sight of his son, though his warrior's bearing never wavered. My son tells me you sing the old songs without fear or mockery, that you understand medicine is medicine, regardless of its source. My grandmother taught me that healing transcends boundaries, Sarah replied. She learned from many peoples, including yours. Every plant that grows, every remedy that works. These are gifts meant to be shared, not hoarded. Black Wolf nodded slowly, then turned to address his warriors in Apache. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, she recognized the rhythm of formal declaration. When he finished, two ravens, whom Sarah now saw clearly for the first time, translated. He says this place is now under the protection of the Warrior Society. Any who threaten the healing work done here threaten us all. The medicine spirits themselves have shown approval through the boy's recovery. Two Ravens' face showed pride as he continued. He also says that you are to be honored as a medicine woman of two worlds, one who builds bridges instead of walls. As if to seal these words, Black Wolf removed his shield and held it out to Sarah. The warriors murmured in approval. Clearly this was a gesture of great significance. This shield bears the marks of both warrior and healer, he explained. Like you, it represents the strength found in walking between worlds. Display it in your home as a sign to all who come here. This place stands under Apache protection. Sarah accepted the shield with appropriate gravity, understanding that this moment would reshape everything. Already she could imagine the reactions when words spread, settler fear, military suspicion, tribal politics. But looking at Running Deer's proud face, feeling the weight of Black Wolf's shield in her hands, she knew she would never regret the path that had led here. Black Wolf turned to survey the surrounding land, his keen scout's eyes missing nothing. Your husband returns soon. Within the week, Sarah answered, wondering how he knew. Good. He should understand what his wife has achieved here, what she has begun. He smiled fully then, transforming his stern features. My son says you have questions about our healing ways. We have questions about yours. Perhaps, he glanced at the rising sun, perhaps it is time for both peoples to learn from each other. The warriors shifted on their horses, adjusting their positions to establish a proper guard. They would be visible for miles, a clear statement to all who saw them. The time for shadows and secrets had passed. Whatever came next would happen in the full light of day. Running Deer moved to stand beside his father, their matching features, made more striking by the similar paint they wore. I told you she was different, the boy said in Apache, then smiled at Sarah's curious look. I told father you were a true healer, one who sees with the heart as well as the eyes. Black Wolf placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his expression both proud and thoughtful. Sometimes the greatest medicine comes not from herbs or songs, but from the courage to reach across boundaries others fear to cross. He looked at Sarah with newfound respect. We will guard this place, this beginning. And perhaps, if the spirits are willing, we will all learn new songs of healing. In the days that followed, Sarah's ranch transformed into something unprecedented in the territory, a place where two cultures began to cautiously interweave. The physical symbol of this change lay across her lap now, a blanket being woven with both Apache and settler patterns, its threads telling a story of unexpected harmony. Morning Sun, one of the warriors' wives who had joined the camp, guided Sarah's hands through the intricate weaving pattern. Like medicine, the older woman explained in careful English, each thread has its purpose. Apart they are weak, together. She pulled the weave tight, showing how the different patterns strengthened each other. Running Deer now strong enough to walk the property, sat nearby, grinding herbs with a stone mortar his father had brought, shaped differently than Sarah's tools, but serving the same purpose. He had become their primary interpreter, though Sarah was slowly learning Apache words, and Morning Sun was eager to practice her English. This pattern, Morning Sun touched a geometric design Sarah had added. It speaks of mountains, like our own good medicine to weave the land into the blanket. Her weathered face creased with approval. You understand the old ways better than most white eyes. My grandmother taught me that everything holds medicine if you know how to see it, Sarah replied, carefully copying a traditional Apache border design. The land, the plants, even the way we weave, it all carries healing power. Black Wolf appeared silently at the edge of the porch, his scout's ability to move unheard still startling after days of his presence. He carried a fresh sprig of sage, which he handed to his son. The settlers approach, he said calmly. Henderson and 3 others. They carry no weapons we can see. Sarah nodded, setting aside the blanket. Since the warriors' arrival, the local settlers had kept their distance, watching the Apache camp with a mixture of fear and fascination. This would be the first direct contact. They come to talk, not fight, Black Wolf continued, studying the distant riders. Perhaps they have finally noticed that no raids have touched this valley since we arrived. A subtle smile crossed his face. Fear can blind men to obvious truths. Running Deer had already begun preparing the ceremonial tea that Sarah had learned was customary for important discussions. He combined Apache herbs with the settler tea she stocked, creating something new, like everything else that was happening here. Walt Henderson's face showed open surprise at finding Sarah calmly weaving with an Apache woman, warriors standing, guard nearby with an air of relaxed vigilance. His eyes darted to Black Wolf's shield, hanging prominently by the door, recognizing its significance, even if he didn't understand its specific meaning. Miss Sarah. He removed his hat, nervous but maintaining his manners. We've come to understand what's happening here. Sarah gestured to the chairs on her porch. You've come to talk. Good. We have tea prepared. She continued in Apache, thanking Morning Sun and Running Deer for their help. The simple act of speaking both languages set the tone she wanted. This was a place where neither culture would be asked to abandon its ways. The settlers watched with a mixture of wariness and wonder as Running Deer served the tea in both Apache ceremonial cups and Sarah's settler china. Black Wolf remained standing, his position carefully chosen to be neither threatening nor submissive. 3 days ago, Henderson said after taking a cautious sip, the Miller Ranch was hit by raiders, but they weren't Apache. He glanced at Black Wolf. They were white men, disguised poorly as Indians. They didn't know that real Apache don't raid during certain moon phases. He seemed almost embarrassed by this knowledge. Your people stopped them. Black Wolf nodded once. Those who break peace must answer for it, regardless of their race. The territory has enemies of all colors. It also has friends of all colors. His eyes met Sarah's. The wise learned to tell the difference. One of the other settlers, young Billy Matthews, spoke up. My sister's baby was sick last week, real sick. The Apache women... He paused, still struggling with the strangeness of it. They showed my sister's wife how to make a tea, different from anything we knew. The fever broke that night, Sarah smiled, remembering Morning Sun's quiet insistence on sending medicine to the Matthews Ranch. Healing knows no boundaries, she said, repeating the truth. That had become the foundation of everything happening here. Neither does suffering or compassion. Henderson set his cup down carefully. The army'll have questions about all this. He gestured to the camp, the warriors, the easy mixing of cultures happening on Sarah's porch. It's not how things are done. Perhaps, Black Wolf replied. That is exactly why it must be done. The old ways of fear and separation bring only more fear, more separation. Here we try something else. He touched the warrior's shield by the door. Protection and healing, working together. The conversation continued as the sun moved across the sky. Gradually, the settlers' rigid postures relaxed. Questions were asked and answered on both sides. Running Deer and Morning Sun shared stories of Apache healing traditions, while Sarah explained how her grandmother had collected medicines from many cultures. When the settlers finally departed, Henderson paused in mounting his horse. "Thomas returns soon," he said, looking at Sarah. "What will he make of all this?" Sarah touched the shared blanket she'd been weaving. "He'll see what you're beginning to see, Walt. That strength can come from unexpected places, and that healing is bigger than any one people's ways." After they rode away, Black Wolf joined Sarah on the porch. "They are like spring ice," he observed, "beginning to thaw, but slowly. One wrong move could freeze them solid again." "Then we must be patient," Sarah replied, returning to her weaving. "Like Morning Sun says, each thread has its purpose. We're creating something new here, one strand at a time." Running Deer, grinding. More herbs nearby, smiled at their exchange. "Father," he said in Apache, "tells me that the army scouts speak of this place now. They call it the healing ground in both languages." He switched to English. "A place where old wounds might finally begin to mend." Black Wolf watched the setting sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "The land itself approves," he said softly. "See how it offers light to all equally. Perhaps it has been waiting for us to learn this lesson." Sarah looked at her porch, Apache medicine woman and settler healer weaving together, warrior and scout standing guard, a boy of both worlds grinding medicines that respected all traditions. "Not waiting," she corrected gently. "Teaching. All. This time, the land has been teaching us, if only we had eyes to see." The warning arrow came at dawn, its red-painted shaft quivering in Sarah's garden soil. 2 ravens discovered it during his morning patrol, his face grave as he brought it to Black Wolf. Sarah watched their quiet conference, reading tension in their controlled movements. "Trouble comes," Running Deer translated softly, standing beside her with a bundle of freshly gathered herbs. "The arrow speaks of Grey Wolf's band to the north. They do not approve of Father's choices." Black Wolf approached, the arrow held carefully. In his hands, "Grey Wolf is my cousin," he explained to Sarah. "He leads those who broke the peace pipe. This," he indicated markings on the shaft, "is a warning, but also a challenge. He claims I have betrayed our people by protecting a settler's ranch." Sarah studied the arrow's markings, recognizing symbols similar to those on the warrior's shield that now hung beside her door. "And the army?" she asked, knowing Black Wolf's role as a scout complicated matters further. "They send riders today." His expression remained neutral, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle tensions around his eyes. Captain Reynolds wishes to understand this situation. The morning unfolded with an air of contained urgency. Warriors moved with heightened alertness, their relaxed guard of recent days replaced by tactical positioning. Morning Sun and the other women continued their daily tasks, but with weapons close at hand, a reminder that in Apache culture, every adult was a warrior when needed. Sarah worked steadily in her herb garden, aware of the multiple layers of meaning. In each action now, every plant she tended, every medicine she prepared, carried weight beyond its physical properties. She was no longer just a healer, but a symbol, one that some would seek to destroy. "Tell me about Grey Wolf," she said too, Running Deer as they worked. The boy's hands moved surely among the plants, his recovery complete enough that only a slight stiffness remained in his gait. "He is like thunder without rain," Running Deer replied, selecting sage leaves with careful attention. "Much noise, promising power but bringing no good to the land." He glanced at his father, who stood in quiet discussion with his warriors. "He thinks Father's work with the army weakens our people. He does not understand that strength can come in many forms." Mid-morning brought the army patrol, Captain Reynolds with 6 troopers, their blue uniforms stark against the desert landscape. Black Wolf met them at the edge of the property, his bearing that of a scout rather than a warrior chief. though his authority was undiminished. Sarah watched the interaction from her porch, where she deliberately continued working with Morning. Some medicines. Let them see, she thought, that healing continued regardless of politics. Mrs. Mitchell. Captain Reynolds approached the porch, his manner courteous but concerned. Perhaps you could explain why an army scout has established what appears to be a war party on your property. Before Sarah could respond, Black Wolf spoke. Not a war party, Captain, a protection detail. He gestured to the shared activities visible around the ranch. Apache and settler medicines being prepared together, women of both cultures working side by side. We protect something new, something that could bring peace. Reynolds frowned. Black Wolf, you're one of our best scouts, but this complicates things. Grey Wolf's band is stirring up trouble to the north. The settlers are nervous, and now I find you've effectively established a new camp without army approval. With respect, Captain, Sarah interjected, this is private property. My husband Thomas knows Black Wolf through his army contracts. When he returns, your husband, Reynolds cut in gently, is precisely why I'm concerned. Mrs. Mitchell, some might question whether you're acting under duress, whether these arrangements are truly voluntary. A ripple of tension passed through. The watching warriors. Black Wolf's face remained impassive, but Sarah felt the shift in atmosphere. Everything they had built here balanced on a knife's edge. She stood, straightening her apron with deliberate calm. Captain Reynolds, would you like to see something? Without waiting for response, she walked to her grandmother's medicine box, removing a carefully wrapped package. This arrived yesterday from the Matthews Ranch. She unwrapped the package, revealing a beautifully beaded medicine pouch, settler leather worked with Apache designs. Billy Matthews' sister made this, after Apache medicines helped save her baby. She learned the beadwork from Morning Sun here, while Morning Sun learned settler midwife techniques from her. Reynolds studied the pouch, his military bearing softening slightly. It's unusual work. Like everything here, Sarah agreed. Captain, I understand your concerns, but what's happening here is important. Not just the medicines we're sharing, but the trust we're building. Every day, more settlers. Come carefully, cautiously, but they come. They see Apache warriors protecting a settler's ranch, see their wives sharing knowledge instead of suspicion. And Grey Wolf? Reynolds asked Black Wolf directly. What happens when he decides this threatens his power? Then we show him a different kind of strength, Black Wolf replied, the strength of people who choose to heal instead of harm. He met Reynolds's gaze steadily. You know me, Captain. Have I ever led you wrong in matters of peace or war? A horse nickered nervously at the edge of the gathering. Two ravens had spotted something in the distance, riders approaching from the north. Too many riders. Grey Wolf comes, Black Wolf said quietly, sooner than that could destroy everything they had built, or protect it in ways none of them had imagined. Running Deer touched her arm gently. The medicines are ready, he said, his young voice carrying unexpected authority. Whatever happens, we have done the work of healing. No one can undo that. Sarah nodded, watching the dust cloud approach from the north while Captain Reynolds struggled with his decision. The storm was rising, but they had planted seeds of change that would survive any tempest. The only question was how much more healing would be needed before peace could truly take root. The shared garden flourished in the summer heat, Apache healing plants growing alongside settler herbs in neat rows that defied separation. Sarah knelt in the rich soil, teaching young Betty Matthews the proper way to harvest echinacea, while Morning Sun demonstrated how to recognize the subtle differences between similar-looking leaves. My grandmother called this plant snake medicine, Sarah explained, touching the purple petals gently. Your people have another name for it? She glanced at Morning Sun, who nodded. We call it strength against poison, the Apache woman replied, her English growing more confident daily. Good for more than snakes, helps fight the poison of sickness inside. She smiled at Betty's earnest note-taking. Your sister's baby grows strong with our shared medicine. A week had passed since Captain Reynolds' visit, and although Grey Wolf's band hadn't yet appeared, their presence loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. But something unexpected had happened in the meantime. The very tension had drawn more. People to Sarah's ranch, seeking understanding rather than conflict. Black Wolf appeared at the garden's edge, his scout silence now familiar to Sarah. More come, he announced quietly. 3 families from the South Valley. One carries a sick child. His eyes met Sarah's. They ask for both kinds of healing. Sarah brushed soil from her skirts, noting how Betty showed no fear at the warriors' appearance. A month ago, such casual proximity would have been unthinkable. Morning Sun, would you help me prepare the medicines? Betty, you should watch. It's time you learned how we combine the treatments. Inside her cabin, Sarah's workspace had evolved to reflect the blending of traditions. Her grandmother's medicine box sat beside clay pots of Apache remedies, while newly woven medicine pouches hung from the rafters, each one a collaboration between settler and Apache hands. Running Deer, who had appointed himself keeper of the combined medicine records, sat at her table, carefully documenting the treatments in both English and Apache. His writing, learned at the missionary school, preserved knowledge that had previously passed only through oral tradition. Father says Grey Wolf's people watch us, he said without looking up from his work. They do not understand why he allows this writing of sacred things. Knowledge preserved is knowledge protected, Sarah replied, using one of Black Wolf's own. Embraces. Your father understands that change doesn't mean losing the old ways. It means protecting them in new forms. The arriving families brought not just their sick child, but gifts of food and materials, a sign they understood the protocols of respect that had developed around the healing place. Sarah watched as Morning Sun greeted them with the same dignity. She would show her own people, the barriers of language bridged by shared purpose. The sick child, a girl of perhaps 4, burned with fever. Her mother, eyes wide at finding herself among Apache warriors, clutched a worn rag doll. Mrs. Henderson said you work with their medicines now, that her boy's cough was cured by something the Apache women showed you. We work together, Sarah corrected gently, as Morning Sun began laying out herbs from both traditions. Each way of healing has its wisdom. Together, they're stronger. She nodded to Running Deer, who brought forward his book of records. See here? We document every treatment, every result. Your daughter isn't the first with this fever. We know what works. Throughout the afternoon, more settlers arrived, some with ailments, others simply curious. Sarah noticed how Black Wolf's warriors maintained their guard, but made their presence less martial, understanding that trust required both strength and gentleness. Betty Matthews worked alongside Morning Sun, her initial nervousness replaced by genuine interest. My sister says she wants to learn more, she told Sarah during a quiet moment. Not just the medicines, but their stories, their ways of seeing the world. She says maybe we've been blind, thinking our way was the only way. Sarah smiled, remembering her own journey to this understanding. Your sister is wise. Every day here, I learn something new. Watch how Morning Sun prepares that fever tea. See how she whispers prayers over it? Those prayers are part of the medicine, just as important as the herbs themselves. As sunset approached, Black Wolf called Sarah and Morning Sun to a private conference. His face carried the weight of new information. Grey Wolf sends another message. He claims we dishonor the old ways by sharing them with settlers, that writing down sacred knowledge weakens its power. Morning Sun's response was unexpected. She laughed, a sound that startled even her husband. He fears what he does not understand, she said in Apache, then switched to English for Sarah's benefit. Grey Wolf forgets. Our people have always learned from others. Apache medicine itself carries wisdom from many tribes. Why should we stop learning now? Because fear is easier than change, Black Wolf replied, but his eyes showed pride in his wife's wisdom. Yet look what change has brought us. He gestured to the scene before them. Settler families sharing an evening meal with Apache women. Children playing together while adults exchanged knowledge of herbs and healing. Sarah touched the warrior's shield hanging by her door, the symbol that had come to represent everything they were building. Your cousin sees weakness in this sharing, but there's strength here that he doesn't understand. Running Deer approached, carrying his precious book of medical knowledge. Father, I've marked every cure, every treatment that worked. 3 pages. Of fevers broken, wounds healed, lives saved. Is this not power? Is this not what medicine should do? Black Wolf took the book, handling it with unexpected reverence. When I was a boy, my grandfather told me that true strength flows like water, finding new paths without losing its nature. He passed the book back to his son. Perhaps this is what he meant. We do not lose our medicine by sharing it. We make it stronger, like the plants in the shared garden. As night fell, Sarah stood on her porch, watching the blended community prepare for evening. Somewhere to the north, Grey Wolf plotted his response to their quiet revolution. But here, in this space between worlds, seeds of change were taking a root too deep to be easily uprooted. Morning Sun joined her, carrying a newly woven medicine pouch, this one decorated with symbols from both their traditions. When the storm comes, she said softly, remember this moment. Remember that healing is stronger than hatred, that growth is stronger than fear. Sarah accepted the pouch, feeling the weight of all it represented. They'll come soon, won't they? Grey Wolf and his followers? Yes, Morning Sun nodded, but they will find something they do not expect. Not weakness, but a different kind of strength. The strength of people who have learned to see with new eyes. The cavalry officer's letter arrived with the morning supply wagon, its official seal drawing all eyes. Sarah recognized Captain Reynolds' handwriting, but the letterhead bore the mark of someone much higher in command. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal, aware of Black Wolf watching from the shadows of her porch. To Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, she read aloud, her voice steady despite her racing heart. It has come to our attention that your property has become a gathering place for unauthorized Indian activities. While we acknowledge your husband's contract history with certain Apache scouts, your current situation presents an untenable risk to territorial security. Running Deer moved closer, his young face tense. What does it mean, Sarah? It means, Black Wolf answered before she could, that the army fears what it cannot control. He stepped forward, touching the warrior's shield beside her door. They forget that trust, once given, cannot be reclaimed without cost. Sarah continued reading, her stomach tightening at the carefully worded threats wrapped in political courtesy. The letter demanded she cease all unauthorized medical collaboration with the Apache people, warning of potential charges of Indian collaboration if she refused. Morning Sun, working nearby with Betty Matthews and 2 other settler women, straightened from her herbs. The papers speak with fear, she said in her improving English. But look, she gestured to their shared work, to the mixing of medicines and knowledge happening all around them. Look what they would destroy. A horse's whinny broke the tense moment. 2 ravens appeared at the property's edge, his usual calm demeanor disturbed. Riders from the agency, he reported in Apache, and others from Grey Wolf's band. They come separately, but with the same purpose. Sarah felt the weight of the letter in her hands, its official seal now seeming more like a brand of shame than a mark of authority. Around her, the peaceful routine of the healing place shifted into practiced alertness. Warriors moved to defensive positions while appearing relaxed. Women carefully stored away the most sacred medicines, and Running Deer began gathering his precious books of combined medical knowledge. They think to pressure us from all sides, Black Wolf mused, his scout's training evident in how quickly he assessed the situation. The agency will threaten to revoke my scout status. Grey Wolf will speak of tribal purity and tradition. Both will demand we end what we have built here. Betty Matthews stepped forward, her young face set with unexpected determination. Then they'll have to answer to us settlers too. My sister's baby lives because of what we've learned here. The Murphy family's boy walks because of Apache medicine. We won't let them just destroy this. The agency man arrived first, his dusty suit and official manner a stark contrast to the natural harmony of the healing place. Behind him, visible but keeping their distance, rode 3 of Grey Wolf's warriors, their paint and posture clearly meant to intimidate. Mrs. Mitchell, the agency man who introduced himself as Mr. Peterson, managed to make her name sound like an accusation. I see the reports were accurate. Do you have any idea of the diplomatic complexity you've created here, the potential ramifications of unauthorized medical practice among the tribes? Sarah met his gaze steadily, drawing strength from the quiet, support around her. Mr. Peterson, every person here has chosen to be here. Every medicine shared, every life saved, has been done with full understanding and respect for both cultures. That's not the point, Peterson snapped, then caught himself smoothing his manner. Mrs. Mitchell, surely you understand that proper channels exist for a reason. We can't have settlers and Indians mixing freely, sharing God knows what kinds of primitive remedies. Primitive! The word came from Betty Matthews, her voice sharp with newfound confidence. Sir, have you seen their surgical techniques? Their knowledge of herbs that our own doctors haven't even catalogued? Do you know they have treatments for ailments we consider incurable? Running Deer had appeared at Sarah's side, his medical journal held carefully. We record everything, he said in clear English, his education showing. Every treatment, every result. Scientific, like the army doctors want, but also respectful of the old ways. Peterson's face reddened. Boy, you're not helping your father's position here. Black Wolf's status as a scout is already precarious, given these activities. Then I will surrender it. Black Wolf's quiet words cut through the tension. He stepped forward, his bearing regal despite the simple scout's clothing he wore. If the army cannot see that peace grows from understanding, perhaps I have been serving the wrong cause. The threat hung in the air, its implications clear. Black Wolf was one of the most effective scouts in the territory. Losing him would be a significant blow to army intelligence. Grey Wolf's warriors chose that moment to ride closer, their leader's absence conspicuous. Brother, one called to Black Wolf in Apache, your son writes our sacred ways in the white man's books. Your women teach our medicines to settlers. Where does this end? It ends, Black Wolf replied in English, ensuring everyone understood, when we stop fearing what we can become together. He turned to Peterson. You see threat where there is opportunity. You see disorder where there is new harmony. Sarah moved to stand beside him, the cavalry letter still in her hand. Mr. Peterson, before you make your threats official, I invite you to look around. Really look. See the children learning both languages while they learn about healing. See women from both cultures sharing knowledge that saves lives. Ask yourself, isn't this better than fear and separation? Morning Sun approached, carrying a medicine pouch she had been preparing. With quiet dignity, she held it out to Peterson. My grandmother died of fever, she said carefully in English. White doctor could not help. Apache medicine could not help. Now, she gestured to their shared garden, their combined knowledge. Now we have both medicines. Now maybe grandmother would live. Peterson stared at the offered pouch, his official certainty wavering. Before he could respond, more hoofbeats announced. New arrivals. Captain Reynolds appeared with a small patrol, his expression complicated as he surveyed the scene. Peterson, he nodded to the agency man. I see you're investigating our unusual situation here. He dismounted, deliberately casual. Interesting timing, with Grey Wolf's band causing trouble up north. Makes a man wonder what kind of peace is better, the kind imposed by force, or the kind that grows naturally like the medicines in that garden there. Sarah felt the shift in the air, the subtle repositioning of power. Reynolds hadn't come to support Peterson's threats, but to witness their impact. And perhaps, she realized, to make his own choice about which future to support. The ancient trail map lay unfolded on Sarah's table, its leather surface marked with generations of Apache pathways through the territory. Black Wolf traced one particular route with his finger, sharing knowledge that had never before been revealed to settler eyes. "These paths connect more than places," he explained to the small group gathered around her table. "They connect peoples, histories, medicines." His finger stopped at a particular marking. Here, 3 tribes would meet to trade healing knowledge. Now we create new paths, new connections. Walt Henderson nodded thoughtfully, his previous suspicion replaced by hard-earned understanding. Like that route Martha Matthews used last week, getting medicine to the Carson family without drawing attention from Grey Wolf's watchers. The network had grown organically, born of necessity after Peterson's threats. What had started as simple cooperation around Sarah's ranch had evolved into something more complex, an underground web of mutual support spanning both settler and Apache communities. "Speaking of Martha," Sarah added, sorting through the morning's messages, "she reports 3 more families near Pine Creek want to learn the combined medicines. And 2 ravens found another settlement yesterday where they're already using some of our methods." Morning Sun, grinding herbs nearby, smiled at this news. "Knowledge flows like water," she said, her English now flowing smoothly. "Find its own path, even through rock." She held up a medicine pouch marked with both settler and Apache symbols. 5 more women learn to make these now. Soon 10 more will learn from them. The afternoon sun cast dappled shadows through the window as more people arrived. Settler women coming supposedly to trade for basic supplies, Apache mothers ostensibly visiting relatives. Each carried information. Each took away something more than just medicines. Running Deer had developed a clever system for his medical records, using both traditional Apache symbols and English notes. "This way," he explained to young Billy Matthews, who had become his eager student, "those who cannot read English can still understand the treatments, and those who do not know our symbols can still learn." A sudden whistle from outside, 2 ravens signal. Sarah moved to the window, spotting riders approaching from the south. "Army patrol," she announced quietly. The gathered group shifted smoothly into their practiced routine, transforming into an innocent scene of ordinary trading. Captain Reynolds led the patrol himself, his manner suggesting this was more than a routine visit. Sarah met him on the porch, noting how his eyes took in the carefully casual gathering inside. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began formally, then softened his tone. "Sarah, I thought you should know. Grey Wolf made contact with the fort yesterday. Claims he has evidence of seditious activities centered around your ranch. He's playing both sides, trying to stir up trouble with the tribes while painting this as a threat to army control." Black Wolf appeared silently beside Sarah. "And what did the fort commander say to my cousin's claims?" Reynolds shifted in his saddle. "Officially, they have to investigate. Unofficially," he glanced at the peaceful scene behind them, "there are those who've noticed a marked decrease in tensions wherever your methods have spread." Sarah understood the implicit message. The commander doesn't want to disrupt something that's working, even if he can't officially endorse it. "Let's just say," Reynolds replied carefully, "that patrols might be a bit predictable in their timing and routes, enough so that certain activities could continue without official notice. After the patrol departed, the gathering resumed its true purpose. Martha Matthews arrived with news from the northern settlements, where more families had begun incorporating Apache healing practices. A young Apache mother brought word of elders in her band who quietly supported Black Wolf's vision, seeing wisdom in preserving their knowledge in new ways. "The old ways taught us to read the land," Black Wolf observed, studying the trail map again, "to find paths others could not see. Perhaps that was preparation for this moment, learning to find new paths through dangerous times. Sarah watched. Running Deer teaching Billy Matthews the proper preparation of a fever medicine, their young voices mixing English and Apache terms naturally. "We're not just finding paths," she said softly. "We're making them." The evening brought more visitors. Settlers seeking healing, Apache families sharing knowledge, warriors carrying messages along the hidden network of allies. Each interaction strengthened the invisible bonds connecting their communities. Tomorrow, Morning Sun announced, "We teach more women the sacred songs for childbirth." Both Apache and settler songs together, she touched the shared blanket that had become symbolic of their work. "Some say we weaken the old ways by sharing. But look, the songs grow stronger when more voices carry them." Walt Henderson, preparing to leave, paused by Sarah's door. "Thomas returns soon," he said quietly. Words spreading about what's really happening here. Not the fears or rumors, but the truth, about lives saved, knowledge preserved, peace growing stronger than hate. Sarah nodded, thinking of her absent husband. "He'll understand," she said with quiet certainty. "Thomas has always seen further than most. It's why he worked with Black Wolf as a scout, why he supported my learning the old medicines." As darkness fell, the visitors departed along their various hidden paths, trails as old as the land itself, now serving a new purpose. Sarah stood on her porch with Black Wolf and Morning Sun, watching the stars emerge. "Grey Wolf thinks he can stop this," Black Wolf mused, "by threatening a few people, by playing on fears. He does not understand that it has grown beyond any one place or person." Morning Sun touched the warrior's shield hanging by the door. "Like the roots of healing plants," she said, "spreading underground where no one can see them. When Grey Wolf finally strikes, he will find those roots too deep to tear out." Sarah thought of all the connections formed, the knowledge shared, the trust built day by day. They had created something as complex and resilient as the ancient trails marked on Black Wolf's map, a network of human paths connecting hearts and minds across the arbitrary boundaries of race and culture. "We should send word up the hidden trails," she said finally. "Tell everyone to be ready. Grey Wolf won't wait much longer to make his move." Black Wolf nodded, his scout's instincts confirming her assessment. "Let him come," he said simply. "He expects to find a single ranch defending. Strange ideas. Instead, he will find an entire territory already changing. That is a medicine even he cannot fight." The battle drum's deep pulse carried across the valley at sunset, its rhythm speaking of neither war nor peace, but something in between. Thomas Mitchell drew his horse to a halt on the ridge overlooking his ranch, trying to make sense of the scene below. Apache warriors stood guard alongside his own ranch hands, while women of both races worked together in what had once been Sarah's simple herb garden. "Quite a change, isn't it?" Walt Henderson's voice came from behind him. The older man had been waiting at this spot, clearly prepared to intercept Thomas before he reached the ranch. "There's a lot to explain, Thomas. Best you hear it before you ride down there." The drum continued its complex rhythm as Walt outlined the extraordinary events of the past weeks. Thomas sat silently in his saddle, his expression unreadable as he learned of Running Deer's healing, Black Wolf's protection, and the remarkable transformation of his wife's modest healing practice into something that was reshaping the entire territory. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "she's always seen things others miss, saw it in me when we first met, saw it in this land when others just saw hardship." He turned to Walt. "And Black Wolf? He's there now? Watching?" "As I expect," Walt replied with a hint of acquired wisdom. "Man doesn't become the army's best scout by missing much." He paused, then added, "Thing is, Thomas, what's happening down there? It's bigger than just your ranch now. Got roots spreading throughout the territory. The drum's rhythm changed, taking on a more urgent tone. On the ranch below, warriors moved with practiced precision to defensive positions. Through his field, Glasses. Thomas could see Black Wolf emerging from the shadows near his front porch, speaking quickly to his men. "Grey Wolf comes," a quiet voice said behind them. Two ravens had materialized like a shadow given form. "He brings many warriors. Some are his. Some," he hesitated, "some are angry young men from other bands, hungry for war." Thomas straightened in his saddle. "My wife, she's safe." "Your wife," two ravens replied with unexpected respect, "is stronger than storm winds, but now she needs her husband to be just as strong." He pointed to the north, where dust clouds marked the approach of multiple riders. "Grey Wolf thinks to find weakness in our mixing of ways. He must instead find unity." Thomas touched the army contract in his saddlebag, papers that seemed suddenly insignificant compared to the choice before him. "Walt, ride to the fort. Tell Reynolds what's happening. Two ravens, let's introduce me to my wife's new friends." The scene that greeted Thomas in his own yard felt like stepping into a dream. Sarah stood on their porch, his beloved wife somehow, both familiar and transformed. She wore her usual practical dress, but now a beaded medicine pouch hung at her waist, and she carried herself with a quiet authority he'd never seen before. "Thomas," she breathed, joy and anxiety mixing in her voice. "I had hoped you'd return before—" She gestured to the north, where the dust clouds grew closer. "Before your medical practice decided to change the whole territory," he finished, swinging down from his horse. The joke fell flat as the drum's rhythm suddenly ceased, leaving a pregnant silence. Black Wolf approached, his bearing both militant and diplomatic. "Your wife," he said without preamble, "has helped create something precious, something that could bring real peace, not just the absence of war. Grey Wolf comes to destroy it before it can take root." Thomas studied the Apache leader, remembering their past interactions during his army contracts. "You believe in this enough to risk your position as scout? You're standing with your own people?" "I believe in it," Black Wolf replied. "Enough to die for it. The question is, do you believe in it enough to stand with us?" The answer was stolen by the thunder of hooves. Grey Wolf's band poured over the ridge like a flash flood, nearly 40 warriors strong. Their leader rode slightly ahead, his face painted for war, but his manner suggesting this was more performance than battle, at least for now. "Brother," Grey Wolf called to Black Wolf in English, making sure all could hear, "I come to save you. And from this madness, look what you have done. Warriors acting as nursemaids, sacred medicines being written in white man's books, our women teaching settlers our ways." He wheeled his horse in a tight circle, playing to his audience of young warriors. "The army tolerates you, cousin, because you are useful. But this," he gestured contemptuously at the scene before him, "this weakens us, dilutes our strength, dissolves our traditions into settlers' soup." Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying unexpected authority. "Your traditions live in new ways here, Grey Wolf. They grow stronger by being shared, not weaker." "Silence," Grey Wolf snapped. "You are the root of this disease. You and your herbs and your ideas about mixing what should stay pure." He turned back to Black Wolf. "Brother, I give you one chance. End this foolishness. Return to the old ways, or we will end it for you." Thomas felt the tension vibrating in the air like heat waves. Neither side had drawn weapons, but the possibility of violence hung like storm clouds about to break. He made his decision. "My wife," he said clearly, moving to stand beside Sarah, "has done what the army has failed to do for years. What you've failed to do, Grey Wolf. She's found a way forward that doesn't require either side to lose who they are." Running Deer emerged from the cabin, carrying his precious book of medical knowledge. The boy's presence caused a stir among Grey Wolf's warriors. Many had heard of Black Wolf's son being healed by a settler woman, but seeing him standing proudly between both worlds carried powerful impact. "Uncle," Running Deer addressed Grey Wolf with formal respect, "you speak of pure traditions, but our traditions teach us that medicine is medicine, that healing comes from the earth itself, which knows no boundaries." He held up his book. "We Do not weaken our ways by preserving them. We do not diminish our strength by sharing it. A movement at the edge of the gathering drew everyone's attention. Morning Sun and several other women, both Apache and settler, had begun grinding medicines. The familiar sound and scent of healing herbs drifted across the tense scene, a reminder of what was really at stake. "You see weakness," Black Wolf said to his cousin, "because you look with eyes clouded by fear. But ask yourself, why have raids decreased where our shared medicine is practiced? Why do fewer young men speak of war in the settlements that have learned our ways?" Grey Wolf's face darkened. "Pretty words, cousin, but words will not—" The rest of his threat was cut off by new hoofbeats. Captain Reynolds crested the ridge with a full patrol, their arrival carefully timed thanks to Walt's warning, but they weren't alone. Behind them rode a group of Apache elders, their presence carrying the weight of tribal authority. The storm was about to break, but not perhaps in the way Grey Wolf had expected. The split arrow lay on the ground between the opposing groups, its broken shaft a stark symbol of the choice before them all. One of the tribal elders, Ancient Bones, had cast it there with deliberate ceremony, its meaning clear to both Apache and settlers. Decisions made here would divide or unite them forever. Thomas stood with his arm around Sarah's shoulders, feeling the tension in her body as she watched the confrontation unfold. His own emotions warred within him, pride in his wife's courage, worry for their safety, and a growing understanding of just how important this moment was for the territory's future. "Grey Wolf speaks of purity," Ancient Bones announced in Apache, with Running Deer translating for the settlers present. "He fears the mixing of ways will weaken us. Yet I have lived long enough to remember when Apache medicine itself was young, born from the mixing of many tribal ways." The elder's eyes swept the gathering. Everything pure was once mixed, everything strong was once new. Captain Reynolds dismounted slowly, deliberately leaving his rifle in its saddle scabbard. "The army has concerns about unauthorized gatherings." He began formally, then smiled slightly. "However, we also have reports of significantly reduced tensions in areas where cooperative healing practices have taken root." Grey Wolf's face twisted with frustration. "You all speak of peace and healing while our ways slip away. Black Wolf, my own blood, writes our sacred knowledge in settler books, teaches our medicines. To White Eyes, allows his son to straddle worlds like a confused crow. No." Running Deer's voice rang out clear and strong. "Not confused, uncle. Aware, like the eagle who sees both the mountain and the valley, who knows that both are necessary." He stepped forward, his medical book held high. "Our ways are not slipping away. They are growing stronger, reaching further, healing more people than ever before." Thomas felt Sarah stir beside him. She squeezed his hand once, then moved toward the center of the gathering. His heart clenched, but he forced himself to let her go. This was her moment, her vision that had brought them all here. "When my grandmother taught me healing," Sarah said into the tense silence. "She told me every plant has its purpose, every medicine its wisdom. She learned from settler doctors, from tribal healers, from anyone who could help her save lives." She looked directly at Grey Wolf. Was she wrong? Should she have let people die to keep her knowledge pure? A murmur ran through Grey Wolf's young warriors. Thomas saw uncertainty flicker across several faces. These were men who had grown up hearing stories of Sarah's grandmother, whose medicines had saved lives regardless of race or tribe. Black Wolf moved to stand beside Sarah, his presence both protective and symbolic. "Cousin, you claim to defend our traditions, but our greatest tradition is survival, learning, adapting, growing stronger by taking the best of what we encounter." He gestured to the ranch, to the mixed group of people watching. "Look around. Is this weakness?" Morning Sun's voice carried from where she still worked with her medicines. "My mother died because we kept medicines separate," she said in clear English. Apache medicine alone could not save her. Settler medicine alone could not save her. But here, she held up a newly made medicine pouch. Here we have both. Here she might have lived. Thomas saw the impact of her words on both sides. Several of Grey Wolf's warriors shifted uncomfortably, while Reynolds and his men exchanged meaningful glances. The tribal elders nodded slowly, their ancient faces showing approval. Grey Wolf wasn't finished. He wheeled his horse again, playing to his increasingly uncertain followers. And what of our warrior strength? What of our independence? Would you have us become tame Indians growing herbs in settler gardens? Is it tame to choose peace when it serves our people better than war? Black Wolf's question cut through his cousin's theatrics. Is it weak to learn new ways of preserving our knowledge, ensuring it survives for our children's children? Ancient Bones raised his hand, commanding attention. I have seen 90 summers, he announced. I have seen our people adapt and survive. The horse was once new to us. The gun was once foreign. We took them, made them our own, became stronger. He pointed to Running Deer's book. Knowledge lives where it is nourished, dies where it is hoarded. Thomas watched the tide turning in the younger warriors' faces. They had come expecting to defend their traditions against weakness, only to find themselves confronting deeper questions about strength and survival. He recognized the look. He'd worn it himself many times during his army contracts. Learning. That truth was rarely as simple as it first appeared. Sarah had begun grinding medicines with morning sun, the familiar rhythmic sound drawing everyone's attention. The scent of healing herbs drifted through the tension, a reminder of what was really at stake. To Thomas's surprise, one of Grey Wolf's younger warriors dismounted and approached the women. "My sister," he said quietly. "She dies slowly from a sickness our medicines cannot cure. The settler doctor says his medicines cannot cure it either." He looked at the combined medicines being prepared. Perhaps both together might help her. The moment hung like a suspended breath. Grey Wolf's face showed the strain of seeing his support crumbling. Yet Thomas noticed something else in his expression, a flicker of uncertainty, a hint of his own internal struggle. Captain Reynolds chose that moment to add his voice. "The army has orders to maintain peace in this territory. From what I've seen, there's no better peace than the kind growing around this ranch." He turned to Grey Wolf. "You're right about one thing. Changes are coming. The question is whether you'll help shape them or just resist them." Black Wolf extended his hand toward his cousin. "Brother, remember when we were boys, how our grandfather taught us that the strongest medicine comes from understanding, not fear. Look around you. Is this not what he meant?" The split arrow lay between them still, its broken shaft catching the late afternoon light. Thomas watched as Grey Wolf faced his moment of truth, understanding that sometimes the hardest battles are fought within our own hearts. The blood-stained shawl fluttered in the evening breeze, Sarah's own shawl, now marked with the price of standing between worlds. The first shot had come from the hills, not from Grey Wolf's warriors, but from some unseen provocateur hoping to spark violence. Sarah had been binding medicines with morning sun when the bullet creased her arm, leaving her shawl stained with the day's sacrifice. Now, as Thomas carefully bandaged her wound, using a mixture of settler gauze and Apache healing, herbs, the gathered crowd watched an even more remarkable scene unfold. Grey Wolf had dismounted, his proud warrior's stance softening as he approached his younger cousin, the one who had asked about his dying sister. "You shame me, young eagle," Grey Wolf said softly in Apache. "You show more courage in seeking healing than I have shown in defending what I thought was purity." He turned to Black Wolf, his voice carrying to all present. "That shot was meant to spark war. Once I would have welcomed such a spark. Now—" He looked at Sarah's bloodied shawl. "Now I see the true cost of clinging to old hatreds." Black Wolf. He approached his cousin slowly, respect and caution mingled in his bearing. The old ways teach us that medicine can come from unexpected sources, he said. Perhaps wisdom can too. The tribal elders had moved to form a circle, their presence drawing everyone's attention. Ancient Bones lifted his hands to the darkening sky. Blood has been shed, he announced, but not in anger or revenge. The settler woman bleeds while binding our medicines. What stronger sign do we need that the spirits approve of this mixing of ways? Sarah stood with Thomas's support, her face pale but determined. Every medicine we craft here, she said clearly, carries the knowledge of both peoples. Every life saved strengthens all of us. She touched her bandaged arm. This blood is not a sign of division, but of connection. Morning Sun approached Grey Wolf, carrying a medicine pouch, one of the new ones that combined both traditions. Your warrior speaks of his sister, she said in careful English. Let us help her. Let her be the first of your band to benefit from our shared knowledge. Thomas watched his wife's face as she observed this interaction, seeing in her eyes the same vision that had driven her to create this extraordinary place. The wound on her arm would leave a scar, but perhaps that too was part of the medicine this land needed. Captain Reynolds had positioned his men carefully during the tension, but now he relaxed his stance. Grey Wolf, he called, the army has long valued your cousin's wisdom as a scout. Perhaps there is room for your wisdom too, in helping us understand how these changes can benefit everyone. The younger warriors in Grey Wolf's band had dismounted, drawn by curiosity to where Running Deer was showing his medical book to young Eagle. The boy's clear voice carried as he explained how Apache symbols and English words worked together to preserve knowledge that had previously existed only in memory. See here, Running Deer was saying, the symbols show which plants must be gathered under which moon, while the writing tells quantities and preparations. Neither way alone tells the whole story. Together, they make the medicine stronger. Grey Wolf watched this exchange, his face showing the internal struggle of a man seeing his world change before his eyes. And what of our warrior strength, he asked, but the heated challenge had left his voice. What becomes of our pride? Look around you, Black Wolf answered. Every warrior here stands ready to fight, yet chooses a different path. Is that not stronger than blindly choosing war? Every medicine we share, every life we save, builds stronger bonds than fear ever could. Sarah stepped forward, despite Thomas's protective hand on her shoulder. Your warriors don't have to stop being warriors, she said to Grey Wolf, but perhaps they can defend something larger than boundaries drawn on maps. Perhaps they can protect this new way of healing, this bridge we're building between peoples. Ancient Bones lifted the split arrow from the ground, holding it so all could see. In the old days, he said, when a warrior broke an arrow, it meant rejection of peace. But our ancestors were wise. They knew that broken things can be remade. Stronger than before. He handed the arrow to Grey Wolf. The choice is yours, son of my sister's son. Will you help us remake what is broken? The silence hung heavy as Grey Wolf stared at the arrow in his hands. Finally, he looked at young Eagle, at the hope in the young warrior's face as he thought of his dying sister. When I was a boy, Grey Wolf said slowly, my grandmother told me that the strongest medicine comes from the hardest places to reach, the highest cliffs, the deepest canyons. He turned to Sarah and Black Wolf. Perhaps she meant more than just places. Thomas felt Sarah lean against him slightly, the day's tension and blood loss taking their toll. Yet her voice remained strong as she responded, every medicine in my grandmother's box came with a price. Knowledge earned through trial and loss and learning. What we build here will have its price too. Today, it was my blood. Tomorrow, it may be something else. But the medicine is worth the cost. Grey Wolf looked at the arrow once more, then deliberately fitted the broken pieces together. My sister's life is worth more than my pride, he said finally. Young Eagle, help me bind this arrow together. Let us learn these new medicines. This new way, he turned to his warriors. Those who choose to follow me on this path may stay. Those who cannot accept it may leave with honor. Not a single warrior moved to leave. Instead, they began dismounting, drawn by the familiar scent of healing, herbs and the promise of new knowledge. Morning Sun and the other women resumed their medicine binding, now joined by curious young warriors eager to help their ailing kin. Sarah's soft voice carried to Thomas alone. Look at them all, choosing to become something new without losing what they are. That's the real medicine here, isn't it? Thomas held her close, understanding at last the full scope of what his remarkable wife had helped create. The territory will never be the same, he said. No, Black Wolf agreed, overhearing. It will be better. But the price of this change must be paid every day, in small choices and continued courage. He touched the warrior's shield hanging by Sarah's door. Like the medicines we share, this new strength must be tended, protected, allowed to grow in its own way. The sun set on a scene none could have imagined when it rose. Apache warriors learning settler medicine techniques, tribal elders advising on how to preserve sacred knowledge in new ways, and at the center, a simple ranch that had become something extraordinary, a place where healing meant more than just mixing medicines. Sarah's bloodied shawl would be kept as a reminder, ancient bones declared, of the day when blood served to bind rather than divide. The price of unity had been paid in full measure, but its medicine would serve generations to come. The peace fire burned at the center of the gathering, its flames reflecting off faces both pale and copper, as the assembled group formed the largest healing circle the territory had ever seen. Sarah sat between Morning Sun and Grey Wolf's sister, Swift Deer, whose improving health had become living proof of their combined medicine's power. Tell them, Ancient Bones instructed Sarah, how your grandmother's medicine came to you. They must understand that all healing wisdom has its story. Sarah touched the fresh scar on her arm, now a badge of the price paid for unity. My grandmother learned from many sources, she began, her voice carrying in the evening stillness, from settler doctors who shared their books, from tribal healers who trusted her with their knowledge, from watching the land itself teach its lessons. She taught me that wisdom belongs to those who respect it, regardless of their origins. Swift Deer, though still weak, sat straighter. When my brother brought me here, she said in careful English, I thought I came to die. Our medicines alone, they could not help. Settler medicines alone had failed. But together, she touched the medicine pouch at her neck, decorated with symbols from both cultures. Together, they made me strong again. Thomas watched from his position in the circle, still, amazed at how much had changed in the weeks since his return. The ranch had become a true healing center, with regular gatherings like this one, where knowledge was shared and bonds strengthened. Even Grey Wolf had found a new purpose, using his warriors' discipline to organize the protection of their expanding network of healing places. The army sends word, Captain Reynolds announced from his place in the circle. The commander has officially designated this area as a medical exchange zone. No restrictions on peaceful gatherings, no questions about who comes to learn or teach. He smiled slightly. Apparently, reduced raid activity and improved settler tribal relations are good for military careers. Black Wolf nodded appreciatively. And our tribal council? They have seen the wisdom of preserving knowledge in new ways, Ancient Bones replied. Running Deer's books will be copied, with each band keeping both the written records and the oral traditions, double protection for sacred wisdom. Young Eagle, who had become one of their most dedicated students, raised his hand. But what of those who still resist? This morning we found destroyed medicine pouches on the North Trail. Some still fear this mixing of ways. Sarah exchanged glances with Morning Sun. They had expected this. Change never came without resistance. Show you them, Sarah said quietly. Morning Sun opened her medicine bag, removing a strange-looking pouch. This morning's destruction taught us something new. she explained. "See how the broken medicines mixed together in the dirt? They created a poultice we had never imagined. Even those who fight change end up serving it." The fire crackled, sending sparks into the darkening sky. Around its light, settler women sat learning Apache songs of healing, while tribal mothers practiced reading the medical symbols Running Deer had developed. Young warriors who had once sought glory in battle now competed to master the intricate art of medicine preparation. "There will always be fear," Black Wolf observed, watching the interactions. "Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of the unknown. Our task is not to eliminate fear, but to show a better path despite it." Thomas moved to sit beside Sarah, noting how naturally she shifted between languages now, how confidently she guided both cultures toward understanding. "You've created something remarkable here," he said softly. "We all created it," she corrected. "Every person who chose to trust, to learn, to change, they're all part of this medicine." Grey Wolf, who had been quietly observing, suddenly stood. "I have an announcement," he said in both languages. "My band's summer camp will be moved closer to this place. Not to watch or guard, but to learn. Our young ones should grow up seeing this new way, understanding that strength comes in many forms." A murmur of approval ran through the circle. One by one, others stood to make similar commitments. Walt Henderson offered part of his ranch for a new healing garden. Captain Reynolds promised military escorts for medicine gatherings. Ancient Bones declared that tribal ceremonies would now include prayers for this new kind of peace. Running Deer had been working on something special for this moment. He opened his medical book to a new page, where elaborate drawings showed the ranch's transformation into a proper healing center. "Here," he pointed, "we will build a lodge for teaching, big enough for all who wish to learn. And here, gardens for both people's medicines to grow together." Sarah studied the plans, recognizing how they incorporated elements from both cultures. The layout respected Apache traditions about direction and purpose, while including settler-style buildings and work areas. Like everything else they'd created, it was something new, born from the wisdom of both worlds. "But the real healing place," Morning Sun added, "is not in buildings or gardens. It is in here." She touched her heart. "In the trust we build, the knowledge we share, the peace we choose every day." Swift Deer, whose recovery had helped convince many doubters, raised her voice in a traditional healing song. One by one, others joined in, Apache voices carrying the ancient melody, while settler voices learned its rhythms. The fire seemed to dance to their music, casting light on faces now united in purpose. Sarah felt the familiar burn of tears in her eyes. This was what her grandmother had dreamed of, what the land itself had been trying to teach them all along. Looking around the circle, she saw not separate peoples, but a single community, bound together by something stronger than fear or tradition alone. Thomas squeezed her hand gently. "Your grandmother would be proud," he whispered. "Our grandmothers," she corrected, smiling at Morning Sun, "all of them. They knew that healing is bigger than any one people's ways." The night deepened around their fire, but no one moved to leave. They had found something precious here, a way forward that honored the past while building something new. Like the medicines they shared, they had become stronger together than apart, and in the flickering firelight, Sarah saw the future taking shape. A place where healing transcended boundaries, where wisdom grew stronger through sharing, and where the oldest medicines of all, trust, respect, and understanding, could finally work their magic on the territory's deepest wounds. The sunrise feather arrived with the first light, carried by a runner from the northern territories. Sarah recognized its markings. It came from a tribe they had never directly contacted, yet one that had somehow learned of their work. The message, wrapped around its shaft, spoke of hope. "We, too, seek the path between worlds." Thomas found her on the porch, studying the feather's intricate decorations. "Another one?" he asked, settling beside her with their morning coffee. In the month since the Great Gathering, such messages had become more frequent. feathers, letters, even visitors from distant settlements, all drawn by stories of the place where healing bridged ancient divisions. The word spreads on its own. "Now," Sarah said softly, watching Morning Sun teach a group of mixed heritage children how to identify healing plants. Like seeds carried on the wind, Running Deer approached, his medical book now accompanied by several copies in various stages of completion. Other communities had begun requesting their own versions, each adding local knowledge to the growing collection of shared wisdom. "Father says 3 more bands want to establish healing circles," he reported proudly. "They ask for our help in beginning." The ranch had evolved to meet these expanding needs. New buildings had risen alongside the original cabin, a teaching lodge built in the Apache style, a settler-style dispensary for medicines, and meeting spaces that blended both traditions. The healing garden had grown into a vast collection of plants from both cultures, tended by knowledgeable hands of all backgrounds. Black Wolf emerged from the morning mist, returning from his scout duties. But now he served a different purpose. Instead of tracking hostile movements, he helped establish safe routes between healing centers, ensuring knowledge and medicines could flow freely. "The army sends interesting news," he announced, joining them on the porch. "Other territories have heard of our success. They ask how to create similar arrangements in their regions." His eyes held a glint of satisfaction. "Captain Reynolds has been promoted to Major, largely due to the peace we've built here." Sarah smiled, remembering Reynolds's initial skepticism. Now he was one of their strongest advocates, helping navigate the complex political waters that surrounded their work. "And Grey Wolf?" she asked. "How does he fare in his new role?" "My cousin," Black Wolf replied with pride, "has become our most effective teacher of warrior healers. He shows young men how to be strong while learning gentler arts." He touched the warrior's shield that still hung by Sarah's door. He understands now that true strength often lies in knowing how to heal rather than harm. The morning routine unfolded around them. Women from both cultures preparing medicines, children learning both languages through songs and stories, warriors standing guard while simultaneously studying healing arts. What had once been revolutionary had become beautifully ordinary. Swift Deer, now fully recovered, had emerged as a gifted healer herself. Sarah watched her demonstrate a complex medicine preparation to a mixed group of students. The young woman's presence was living testimony to the power of their combined knowledge. "Something's changing," Thomas observed, following Sarah's gaze. "It's not just about healing sickness anymore, is it?" "It never was," Morning Sun answered, joining them. "True healing must go deeper than the body. We heal the spirit of this land, the connections between peoples." She handed Sarah a newly completed medicine pouch. "Look what young Eagle made." His first solo work. The pouch was exquisite, traditional Apache beadwork incorporating settler symbols of healing, lined with settler-tanned leather but decorated with Apache prayers. Like everything else they'd created, it represented the best of both worlds. A commotion at the property's edge drew their attention. 2 ravens was escorting a group of visitors, tribal elders from far to the west, come to see for themselves. What they'd heard whispered around council fires. Sarah straightened her apron, prepared to once again demonstrate how their miracle had grown from simple seeds of trust and respect. "Tell me again," one of the elderly visitors requested after the formal greetings, "how this began. We hear many stories, but we would know the truth." Sarah exchanged glances with Running Deer, who had become as much her son as Black Wolf's. Together, they led the visitors to the original herb garden where everything had started. "It began with a choice," Sarah explained, touching the scar on her arm that had become a badge of honor. "A choice to see beyond fear, to trust that healing knows no boundaries." She gestured to the mixed group of people going about their daily work. "What you see here grew from that single decision, fed by the courage of everyone who joined us." Running Deer added, We discovered that wisdom grows stronger when shared, that traditions can be preserved while growing in new ways. He opened his medical book, showing how they had developed methods to protect and expand ancient knowledge. The visitors watched Wide River, one of Grey Wolf's former warriors, carefully measuring herbs while explaining their properties to settler children. They saw Young Eagle, whose sister's illness had helped turn the tide, now teaching other young warriors the art of medicine preparation. "And the resistance?" another elder asked. "Surely not everyone accepts this mixing of ways." "There will always be those who fear change," Black Wolf acknowledged. "But we have shown them something more powerful than fear. Results. Lives saved, peace maintained, knowledge preserved and expanded." Thomas stepped forward. "When I first returned to find my ranch transformed, I too had doubts. But look around. Every face you see here represents someone who chose to trust, to learn, to grow beyond the old boundaries." Morning Sun, who had been quietly observing, suddenly raised her voice in a healing song. One by one, others joined in, Apache and settler voices intertwining in harmony. The visiting elders' eyes widened at hearing their sacred songs carried by new voices, strengthened rather than diminished by the sharing. Sarah felt the familiar warmth in her chest as she watched their daily miracle unfold. The sunrise feather had promised new beginnings, but the real dawn was already here. In every shared song, every mixed medicine, every barrier broken down by trust and respect. "Your grandmother," Morning Sun said softly, touching Sarah's arm. "She would see her dreams growing here, taking root in good soil." Sarah nodded, thinking of all the grandmothers, Apache and settler alike, whose wisdom had laid the foundation for this transformation. "They knew," she replied. "They all knew that healing was meant to bring people together, not keep them apart." As the morning sun climbed higher, Sarah saw in its light the promise of dawn realized, not just for their small corner of the territory, but for all who sought a better way forward. The seeds they had planted had taken root, growing into something far beyond their original dreams. The visiting elders would carry these stories back to their people, just as others had before them. And with each telling, the circle of healing would grow wider, stronger, more deeply rooted in the heart of the land itself. 10 years later, Sarah ran her fingers over the worn cover of the Mixed Blood Medicine book, its pages now filled with decades' worth of combined wisdom. Running Deer, no longer the wounded boy but a respected healer in his own right, sat beside her on the porch of the expanded healing center, adding new entries in his careful hand. "How many copies now?" she asked, though she knew the answer. 23 complete volumes," he replied proudly. "From here to the Pacific territories, each one adding their own knowledge, their own stories of healing." He touched the scar on her arm, now a sacred mark to his people. And it all began with one choice, one moment of trust. Inside, the sounds of the afternoon lesson drifted through. The open windows, Morning Sun, her hair now streaked with silver, teaching a new generation of healers. Her voice mixed English and Apache as naturally as the medicines they prepared combined both traditions. Thomas appeared from the garden, where he worked with Black Wolf's granddaughter, teaching her the settler techniques for preserving herbs through the winter. The old scout himself had passed 2 summers ago, but his legacy lived on in the network of healing centers that spanned the territories, in the peace that had taken root as surely as the medicines they grew. Grey Wolf, who now led the warrior healers, society had been right when he said change would bring its own kind of strength. The territory had transformed around them, not through force or fear, but through the simple power of shared healing and mutual respect. "Grandmother would be proud," Sarah said softly, watching the mixed group of children playing in the yard, Apache and settler children who would grow up knowing no other way than this unity they had created. The warrior's shield still hung by her door, its symbols now repeated on healing centers throughout the West. Like the medicines they had combined, like the traditions they had preserved while allowing them to grow, They had created something new without losing what was precious about the old. Running Deer closed the book carefully, its pages containing not just medical knowledge, but the story of how healing could bridge any divide, how trust could grow in the most unlikely soil. "We will keep adding to it," he said. "Keep learning, keep growing. Like the land itself, there is always more wisdom to discover." Sarah nodded, feeling the rightness of it all. Their legacy lived not just in books or buildings, but in changed hearts and minds, in children who would never know the fear and separation of the past. In the end, that was the most powerful medicine of all, the knowledge that healing, true healing, knew no boundaries. The afternoon sun painted the mountains gold, just as it had on that first day when a wounded boy collapsed at her door. Some choices, Sarah reflected, contained entire futures within them. They had chosen healing over fear, unity over division, growth over stagnation. And in doing so, they had written a new story for the territory, one that would be told around fires and in healing circles for generations to come.